Erev Tov Zichron Yaakov. Good morning, Santa Monica. Greetings to friends of Israel and all of our friends around the United States, around Israel, and around the world. Here in the United States, it's just about Christmas week and people are getting into the spirit. So what better way to share that spirit with some amazing, we call them wonder women of wine. And indeed, you're going to meet two great winemakers today who have their own inspiring personal stories that we're going to hear about. And they're going to be talking about a topic that many of us are passionate about, which is great wine. So first and foremost, let us know where you're calling in. I see Maryland, I see Ottawa, Canada, I see Kempton, Pennsylvania. We know we have a global audience of wine lovers, and we want to hear where you are today, where you're going to be for your holidays. And if you're willing to share, because we are among experts here, tell us a little bit about the wines you like to drink. Tell us if you know the exact bottle of wine you love or a kind of wine that is your favorite, let us know what it is, and then maybe we can a little more. I see folks from Quebec, from Carmel, from Jaco, Costa Rica, and from Overland Park, Kansas. So we're really covering a lot of the country. I see Chicago is checking in. And I know we've got a lot of wine lovers. And indeed, today you're going to hear, I see my first Cabernet Sauvignon lover. Someone who, let's see, Carmel's parents are on in Tel Aviv. So it's a family affair. And I know Theodora's mom is nearby as well in Dallas. So we are, we love friends, we love family here. And indeed, this is not only a family friendly show, it's my parents are in the other room. So we have got, we certainly have, the beginnings of a holiday celebration here. So let me tell you a little bit about our two panelists. I've got a Shiraz lover who has checked in, Sauvignon Blanc. We've got people calling in from Venice, Florida, not far from where I am, Houston, Texas, sparkling wine lovers. So there's a whole array. I'm a Bordeaux guy, and I know Carmel's got a specialty in that area, but we will hear about a little bit about everything. You're going to hear first and foremost about the two wineries that both of our panelists are involved with. We have a woman who has a title here that I have never seen before, neither in my legal career or in my webinar career or in any other forum. She is a Theopatra, which is the queen of wine, the queen of the vineyards, Theopatra. This is Theodora Lee. She started a career as a partner at a law firm in San Francisco and discovered that her passion and love for wine was something she could actually turn into a career. And indeed, she's now the owner of Theopolis Vineyard. And I mean, that is like so cool to have your name not only on the wine bottle, but on the whole thing. And Theodora, I mean, I can't wait to hear just from our earlier discussions to hear you lay it out, how you go from litigator to someone who is telling people where to bring the bottles of wine. That sounds like an awesome journey for anyone that went to law school, even your colleagues that went to UT Austin. So we're thrilled to have you here, Theodora. We love your pride, and particularly now that you're back in Texas. Carmel Greenberg, thank you. Carmel Greenberg is going to join us. And Carmel, if you had to choose a name, a first name, if your parents could give you a name for a child that was going to go on to become a winemaker, Carmel is about as good a name for an Israeli born Moshavnik like you. So I know from our prior discussions, you were born and raised near Mount Tabor in an area that has wineries in Israel. You started your career in Tel Aviv in design and in French cuisine at one point. And then, I don't know, Asimon Nafal, at some point you said to yourself, I know I'm a winemaker inside. You got on a plane, you went to UC Davis, you learned the profession, and here you are now at this major storied winery, Clos du Val, a 50-year legacy. The winemakers that we did our research on this, you're in like one of those mover shaker places that gets to beat up on the French wineries now and then. So what an amazing panel, two amazing Wonder Women. Carmel, let's start with you. I know you have, you're going to introduce us to the winery and share a little bit about your journey. And then we're going to hear from Theodora, the same, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it means in the careers that you're in today. So Carmel, go ahead and kick us off.
Thank you, Wayne, for the introduction. I'm super excited to be here. It's one of the first time I'm presenting my story, so I'm really excited about it. Yes, small correction, I wasn't born in Israel. I was actually born here in the US. But my parents moved to Israel when I was an infant, when I was a small baby. So I did grow up in Israel all my life. Hebrew is my first language. So Erev Tov lekulam Israel, V'dash lekulam. And I moved here in 2006 to pursue my dream of becoming a winemaker. And now, yeah, I live in Napa Valley. I became winemaker here at Clos du Val in June. So I just completed my first harvest here in Clos du Val. It was a great harvest, and I'll tell you more about it in the presentation. So excited, and let me tell you a bit about my story. So after in Israel, as you know, lots of people go to it's mandatory to go to the military. After my military service, I traveled the world a bit and came back to Tel Aviv to decide on a career path. I was always interested in art and design. So I registered for an interior design degree in Hulon Institute in Hulon, it's right near Tel Aviv, and started my studies there. To support myself during school, I worked at one of Tel Aviv's French restaurants. It's called Yoezer Bar Yain, and it really had a big wine collections from wines around the world. And a part of the training there was learning about wines of the world. And that was really my first introduction to the world of wine. Growing up, I didn't drink a lot of wine. Of course, we had wine, on Friday nights and in holidays, but it wasn't a big part of our life. I think I probably tasted more beer than wine growing up. And maybe we can start the presentation and you can see some pictures.
The next best thing to actually drinking the wine.
Right, and we do have a saying in the wine business that you need a lot of beer to make good wine. So it's always good to have some beer around. Well, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so working at Yoezer, I got my first introduction into the wine world, and I was hooked immediately. I fell in love in this product that has such a story, from the location and the history and the family and the people, the land, the environment. There's so many different factors that go into producing a bottle of wine. And then that bottle of wine could travel around the world and get into consumers' hands and have people enjoy it so far away from where it was produced. So because I was so interested, I started going tastings first in Israel, because that was close by, but then I traveled to Europe a little on my own and with my sisters, tasting wines and going to different, mostly Italy and France in the beginning. And that picture on the side is actually me in 2002 in Italy. After I worked in Yoezer, I did go to work in another restaurant in Tel Aviv called Mantarei, which is on the beach. And there, Rekanati is one of the big wine producers in Israel. And to promote wine in the restaurant business, they started a wine knowledge competition. I represented Monterey for that first competition and won first place. And that little news clip is from that competition. And that really gave me the boost of confidence that, I got this, I like this, and I know this. And even though I was still not done with my design degree, I kind of already felt that my passion for design was changing over to wine. So when I finished my degree, I did a few small projects with design, but I looked for a job in the wine industry. And living in Tel Aviv, one of the big wine stores is called Varietals. And I started working there to get more familiar with wines of the world, be connected to people in the industry, and kind of think about my next steps in changing my career. So maybe we can go to the next slide. So after working at the wine store for about a year, I decided that this is my passion and my dream, and I would want to get a more formal education. My first inclination was to go to Australia. I wanted to go to Adelaide and learn there. But since, like I said, I was born in the US, so I had a US citizenship, it made sense to come to California. And my sister lived here at the time, so it would make the transformation easy. So my husband and I relocated to California in 2006, in the goal of going to UC Davis, obtaining a degree, and then going back to Israel to make wine in Israel. I wasn't aware that it would take me quite a while to get into Davis because I had a degree in art. I had to work on prerequisites in chemistry, physics, math, biology, and build up that science foundation to even apply to Davis. So that took a while. And while I was doing that, I had my first daughter, Eden, which is photographed there. So by the time I actually got accepted to Davis, Eden was 1 year old. And I did my degree in Davis with her help. And that's me in the Davis vineyards, practicing identifying grapes. Next slide. All right, so after I graduated from Davis, we moved to Napa. And like I said, my dream came true. I was working in several different Napa wineries. I started an internship at Cakebread and lab, getting to know the lab, the wine industry from the lab side. Then I worked at Pukela for about 3 years as enologist. And then at Dominus Estate, the majority of my experience was there. A really place where I learned a lot about Bordeaux varieties. My career did take a path to Bordeaux varieties. Cakebread does a variety of wines, but Pukela is focused on Bordeaux and especially Dominus Estate. Dominus Estate is one of the wines that Christian Moix owns from France. So the focus is Bordeaux style grapes, farming and producing. And you can see by then I had my second daughter, Zoe, which is pictured there, again, joining me at work and out at the vineyards. And so next slide. And then finally now, like I said, in June of 2021, I accepted the job as winemaker here at Clos du Val. And so a very exciting time. The production here is much bigger than I've done before. We do a variety, we do Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec, and also we do some Sauv Blanc, and I'm going to make a Rosé this year. So this year was really getting to know my wonderful team here at Clos du Val, getting to know the vineyards, the area, the climate, and some of these pictures here are part from this harvest. So sorting the grapes, pressing them, sampling in the vineyards. And just a little note as well, the picture on the right is one of our tastings that we do after the wines are finished. We run through all the wines to rate them. And there are 30 samples of wines there. Just a glimpse into a winemaker's work, as tasting those it looks fun, but it is quite difficult to taste so many wines. It can be tiring, but still exciting and fun. So next slide. So I wanted to tell you a bit about Clos du Val. I'm sure lots of you heard about Clos du Val. Clos du Val has been around for 50 years. It started, the founded year was 1972. Clos du Val means a small vineyard in a small valley. We have about 220 acres of vineyards here in Napa Valley. And again, as I mentioned, planted mostly to Bordeaux varieties. And our climate, our location here is in the southern part of Napa Valley, not the most southern, but right outside Napa City. So it's in a cooler area of the Napa Valley. In the evening, the temperatures here go down a bit more than up north. So ripening is a bit longer, and the cooler nights make for more fresher styles of wine. Next slide. So the story of Bordeaux, the Gollet family wanted to start a winery in somewhere in the world that would make wines that would rival Bordeaux wines. So they hired Bernard Portet, which is pictured here, to travel the world to find a location where they could start a winery. And he spent about 2 years traveling around the world. He went to South Africa, to Australia, New Zealand, and of course the US. And as the outcome of his travels, he found this spot here in Stag's Leap, and that's where they decided to build a winery. Next one. So the first wine that was produced here in Clos du Val was in 1972, and I'm sure lots of you know about the Judgment of Paris. So that wine was included in that 1976 Judgment on Paris. So really one of the founding wineries here in Napa Valley with a very important heritage. 10 years later, in 1986, they did a rerun of the Judgment of Paris, and this time Clos du Val came in first. So we're very proud of the wines that Bernard Portet made here, and again, featuring a very important ageability of the wines. Next slide. So this is our current winemaking team, which Bernard Portet, so the founder winemaker, who made wine here for 30 years, is a close advisor to me, and it's great to have him on the team. And myself joined here in June, and also our assistant winemaker, JP Pierce, who joined this year as well. Next slide. So these are our two, excuse me, one sec. These are our two vineyards here in Napa Valley. Hirondelle Vineyard, which Hirondelle in French means swallow, because there's a lot of swallows that like to nest around the winery building. So Hirondelle is about 120 acres, and it surrounds the winery. And our other vineyard is called Riverbend, and it's just a few miles northwest to us, near Yountville. It has deeper soils. It's adjacent to the Napa River, and also planted to mostly Bordeaux varieties. Next slide. So these are some of our wines. Again, we are focused Bordeaux varieties, but we do make varietal Cab Franc, a Merlot. Sometimes, depending on the year, we produce a PV, but our main wines are Bordeaux blend. So mainly cab driven with different Bordeaux varieties as Malbec, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Cab Franc as blenders. And next slide. And this is our beautiful tasting room, which was renovated in 2018. So you're all welcome to come visit. I hope some of you have been here, but we'll love to see some of you come again. Thank you.
Carmel, that was just super. You got me at Bordeaux, but I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion and hearing the reflections from Theodora. Both of you have folks on this call who have visited your vineyards and who know you, but how one gets the title of Queen of the Vineyards and to be known as Theopatra, you're going to have to share that story with us, Theodora. I know you have great slides to show us, but your personal journey is just so fascinating, and I'm so looking forward to your sharing that with our audience today.
Thank you very much, Wayne. I will start by saying one of the partners at my law firm, his wife Judy is on this call, the Blooms, and I remember them fondly when I joined Littler Mendelsohn back in the 80s. And that's sort of where my story begins. But before we get to California, let's go back to Texas, and you can start those slides. Because people ask a question like, how does a Texan become a winemaker? And the story began back when I was a little girl. That's a picture of me and my father on a horse. My grandparents had a farm in East Texas, and when we would visit, they would let the boy cousins ride the horses because girls just didn't throw their legs up on top of a horse. So instead, I would cry. And my father said, one day, I'm going to buy you a horse. And he came true to be that. And so he bought his first 10 acres of land. He was an educator. And I learned to drive, not in a car, but on a tractor. I learned to ride horses, rope cattle, all of that in Texas. Then I didn't drink wine, okay, in Texas. And the reason I didn't drink wine in Texas is because if you are from the South or Texas, you heard of a grape called muscadine. And my father used to take old muscadine grapes and make wine. And I was a precocious little kid, and you go in and you go into the liquor cabinet and see what your parents were drinking the night before. And I drank that wine, and I have not touched wine because of that, okay? It was like, if this is wine, I don't want to have anything to do with it. But I always say I specialize in pleasure in the bottle. I went to Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was the student body president. And I always say I probably won because I gave people liquor. Back in that day, I made Wonder Punch, which was vodka, Everclear, and 151. You only needed 2 for the night and you were set. Then I to the University of Texas Law School and graduated from the University of Texas, again, had parties and continued making Wonder Punch. I did not do wine. Fast forward to the 80s, I was recruited by Littler Mendelsohn out of the University of Texas, and I moved to San Francisco. And it was in San Francisco that I was introduced to wine. Jordan may recall his colleague, Bob Lieber. I worked with him. I worked with a woman by the name of Barbara Diodoni. All of them had vineyards up in Napa or Healdsburg. And back in the 80s, when you had a brief due to a partner, there was not a fax or email or any way to actually get that brief done, a review. So you got in your car and you drove to wherever that partner was. And in the case of Barbara and her husband, Pierre, they would invite me to stay for dinner and they would offer me wine. I'm like, no, give me some Jack Daniels or some Wild Turkey, okay? And that's what I drink. And she finally asked why I didn't drink wine. And I told her the story about the wild muscadine, and she gave me a Chardonnay, and I eventually began to enjoy it. And as I visited her, Pierre would let me drive the tractor. And so I said, wow, I can't raise cattle like my dad did, but I could have a vineyard. But little did I know how expensive land was in California. So fast forward on the slide. So in 2001, I purchased 20 acres of land in the Yorkville Highlands of Anderson Valley. That is Mendocino. Of course, everyone's heard of Napa. Everyone's heard of Sonoma, Healdsburg, the Dry Creek. I unfortunately am a single woman and I couldn't afford those places, but Barbara suggested that I go to Mendocino. And in 2003, I planted my vineyard and I had to come up with a name. Like I said, I'm single, so I didn't have a Lee family. And plus there was a Lee family across the way. So I adopted my Greek name from pledging Delta Sigma Theta, Theopolis. And that's what you're looking at, Theopolis Vineyards. That's me in harvest and pulling the grapes. I planted Petit Terroir. Did I know anything about Petit Terroir when I planted it? No, but I hired Professor Thomas from the viticulture program at Santa Rosa Junior College to come out and do an environmental study. And they said Petit Terroir was the best grape to grow on the land because I'm surrounded by fir and redwoods. And so move forward, all I wanted to do was to be a grape farmer. I had no desire to be a winemaker. I took courses at UC Davis on the 4 seasons of the vineyard life, because great wine starts in the vineyard. But I had my first harvest in 2006, and I sold my grapes to Mike Officer at Carlisle. Robert Parker, the wine critic, gave it a 96, and that's how I began in the business. In 2012, I delivered grapes to the then buyer. I had to pick in the rain because you don't want to leave the grapes on the vines and let them begin to prune or rot because of rains. And he rejected 8 tons of grapes, okay? I had no place. I can sell a lot of things, but I can't sell 8 tons of grapes in 24 hours. So I found a place to crush them, and I had to decide whether to make wine or grape juice. So I decided to make wine. I had lost my shirt in real estate. This was 2012 vintage. And as a result, I had to barter because I had no wine. So one of my neighbors agreed to make the wine for me. If I gave half of the fruit to him, he could bottle it and get paid for helping make wine. So my 2012 vintage was bottled in 2014. So I had some time to raise some money for caps and bottles and all of that. And that 2012 vintage won gold at Sunset Magazine. So that's how I started making wine. I then had to take a course from UC Davis in how to run a small vineyard while still practicing law. Go to the next slide. And so I learned about making wine. I have a consulting winemaker, and this was an article that was done because our wines have won lots of recognition. And move over Napa, make room for Theopolis Vineyards, because quite frankly, we have some of the growing conditions in the Yorkville Highlands that made Napa famous. And Napa makes great wines, but we also make great wines. Next slide, please. And that's me doing one of the first harvests. I'm still a lawyer, always talking, always giving direction. I enjoy being out in the vineyard. That is what I planted to do, not to make wine. But it's like a kid. They take a lot of your money, they take a lot of your time, and when they make good wine, they make you proud. Let's move to the next slide. So this is my first bottle release party. And those are my parents. My father has gone on, but my mother there in the orange is here. I'm here at her home. She's 95 years old. And we had a wonderful harvest party, and we hope to restart it in 2022 because we didn't have it in 2020 or 2021. But I don't do Bordeaux. I specialize in the Rhone blends. I grow Petit Syrah. I have a Cuvée Cerise, which is the traditional GSM, which is the Rhone blend, is GSM. But I have what I call PMS. I have Petit, Mourvèdre, and Syrah. And so I started blending and making that, we call it Theopatra's Cuvée Cerise. In addition to the Petit Syrah and the Cuvée Cerise, I also bottle several Pinot Noirs. And I have to tell you my Pinot Noir story because I'm a big girl and I don't like wimpy wines. And Pinot Noir is like one of the lightest red wines you ever put your lips around. And I didn't necessarily like it because of something called forest floor. And to me, that's another way of saying dirt or minerality. And some people love their wines like that. I happen to like fruit forward wines, and that is the biggest characteristic of my wines. But I was told that Pinot Noir was the #1 red wine sold in America. And my 95-year-old mother, who has Alzheimer's, will tell you I've always been a capitalist. Even at 5 years old, I had a little red wagon going around selling newspapers. So I couldn't miss out on Pinot Noir brought. So I have Pinot Noir from the Anderson Valley, from the Yorkville Highlands, and sometimes I go down to the Santa Lucia Valley in Monterey County. And so let's move forward. And so this is our little funky tasting room. We're not fancy. This was an old car shed that we took and made it into a tasting room. It holds like maybe 10 or 15 people, but it's like, you know, when we have a harvest party, we do ourselves. People love hanging out in there. People like small areas. Have you ever noticed when you have a party, everyone centers around the kitchen? But this is where people come, and then we have a big garden where we have the tasting. On the deck, we have a good old-fashioned Texas barbecue, and then we have a live band. Let's move forward. And I am happy to say that all of our wines continue to win medals. Here are some of the awards. Our 2017 Cuvée Cerise just won 90 points from Wine Enthusiast. Our Yorkville Highlands Pinot got 90 points from Sunset Magazine. Indeed, I don't know, go to the next slide. I am very proud to say that our Petite Syrah, our 2018 Petite Syrah, got 96 points in cellar selection and was just recognized as number 16 out of the top 100 cellar selection wines in the world. So we are very pleased with our Petite Syrah. And it's not just what we do with the wines, it's the grapes, the vineyard, because everyone who has touched these grapes have made award-winning wines. Keep going, and the awards just keep continuing. Sunset, North Bay, all of them, San Francisco International Wine Competition. This is what makes me proud. This is what makes me happy, because good wine is to be shared with family and friends. My mother doesn't drink, but my family does. Keep going. And this just tells you a little bit about, oh, there's the slide that I was talking about earlier, where we will rate number 16. If you go to this month's Wine Enthusiast magazine, you'll see we were ranked 16 out of the top 100 sellers. And we continue. Our Pinot Noirs, our Petite Syrahs, our Cuvée Cerise. We also bottle a unique wine called Symphony, and it too has won many medals. And it is a crossing between Muscat and Grenache Gris. We call the Symphony Champagne without the bubbles. We are only able to produce about 150 cases because there's only 1,000 acres of Symphony all in the world, including South Africa. Go to the next slide. And I think we're almost done. I am pleased to say that I was nominated this year by Wine Enthusiasts for their Wine Star Awards Person of the Year. Unfortunately, I did not win, but I am going to go to the award show in Miami. It was a pleasure of mine just to be nominated. And keep going to the next slide, please. I think that's it. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
All right. Well, Theodora, you have won you've won our award for sure as the queen of vineyards. Both of you are business people, and you're operating in an industry. And before we come back to some of your personal stories, which I find so compelling, and so tickled that your family and friends are joining us as well today, a number of them. But this is an industry, and in large measure, let's face it, it's a guy's industry. How did you? So first, tell us, what does it take to be? What are the metrics for success? I get it that every single bottle of wine is going to be judged, and they're going to put points on it, and there's a lot of awards, which both of the wineries you're affiliated with have won. But in addition to winning awards as for specific bottles of wine, are there? How do you know if a winery is doing well, year in and year out, and improving and growing? Is it just about market share? Is it about where your wine is being distributed? Is it who's showing up? and writing articles about your wine. Can you share a little bit of perspective on the metrics for the industry, both of you? Carmel, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, since I just joined Clos du Val relatively, just a few months ago, and I'm very focused on the production side. Of course, the success of a winery does depend as well on the sales and the reach out to and growing the customer base. But I really focus on the quality of the wine, maintaining that throughout the years, continuing the legacy of these wines, continuing the style, making sure quality is always kept throughout the different wines we make, from the different kinds, varieties, the different labels. So really focusing on quality, and maintaining that throughout the wines that we make.
Well, let me speak to that, Wayne. I am at the opposite end of the wine business. I am a small, handcrafted vineyard and winery. When I started bottling, I started with 300 cases. I am now bottling 2,000 cases. And in the wine world, that is very, very small. But the way that, quality, as Carmel says, is the key. Because if you make a bad bottle of wine, nobody's going to buy your wine ever again, and your reputation is going to be ruined. So that's why I moved my winemaking operation from Mendocino to San Francisco when I started taking care of my 95-year-old mother in Dallas, because I need to be in there deciding which barrel we are going to bottle, deciding what kind of oak we're going to put. French oak is perfect for me. I will use no other type of oak, and making sure we don't use too much new oak. Those are the decisions that I want to be involved in, even though I have a consulting winemaker, because I'm a type A personality. But for me, trying to grow the business, it has been the coverage, the awards. But more important for me is getting out there and letting the name be known. In fact, someone just told me, I don't watch TV because I got 4 or 5 jobs, but my brand was on a new television show. So all of these people were like, oh my God, this is great product placement. I remember somebody reached out and told me that this was going to be a show and asked me to sign a document letting them do it. That was a year ago. I'd forgotten about it. But that is what you have to keep your name. I always go back to what I was told by one of my law firm mentors, Wes Faston. When someone calls you, you call them right back. Because a lot of people in the wine business don't do that. And I understand that because I return calls, because I return emails, I get a lot of publicity and I follow up. And that is the key to marketing in law, and that is the key to marketing in wine. Get a good product, follow up, and be there with the consumer so that they know who you are.
So Carmel, you by the way, great advice from both of you. I think both regardless of industry, but certainly in the wine industry. Carmel, you started this great new winery in the middle of a pandemic. So I need to ask both of you, what's it been like? In your industry, there are supply chain issues that have affected lots of different industries. We've been talking to people about that in various industries over the course of the last 2 years. How has it affected your operation? And I don't want to make light of this, but I mean, are people drinking more? Are they drinking less? Are they ordering more? Are they coming to visit your wineries, or has that really, taken a hit as well? So I'd love to hear both your perspectives on that.
Well, I think definitely people are drinking more. I think there's plenty of data supporting that starting the pandemic, people were drinking more. I think it's kind of measuring out now back to numbers that were previous pandemic, but people are not drinking less, that's for sure. And the pandemic was challenging for the tasting room, of course, because it had to be closed for months on and off. And even just the way we receive people had to change. Lower capacities, And another side of the pandemic problems was hiring. It's harder to find people, so we have less people at the tasting room. So we really need to measure out that. So we have been trying to accept as many people as we can, but keeping standards for our employees to be safe and for our guests. Specifically at production, since I'm very focused on production, this year we were supposed to have 8 international interns. And because of the pandemic and things changing in different countries very rapidly and suddenly in different parts of the world, many of them could not come. And we found ourselves getting close to harvest with about half of our interns not being able to come to the US. So put us a bit in a stressful point. So we had to start looking for local interns, which again, wasn't that easy because everyone in the Valley was needing interns. But luckily we had some really good local interns. And then just harvest is working very intense, close with people. So we had to implement more strict COVID rules because we really didn't want any outbreak, and during harvest especially. Of course, in general throughout the year, but specifically at this time of year, it's really important for everyone to be safe and to protect each other so we can continue the work.
Well, I will agree with Carmel because people are drinking more. And, shelter in place, I ran a sip sale starting in March of 2020, where I offered free shipping. Direct to consumer sales have increased substantially because of COVID. And for me, the marketing was to get the wine in everyone's home. And I figured once I got it in their home by providing free shipping, they would come back and buy it and pay for the shipping. And that's why one of the things that has happened is that we have actually expanded and begun to produce more wine, like the Cuvée Cerise series. It was the first time it was bottled was last year. I went back into the barrel room and found 2 barrels of 2017 Petite and 2 barrels of 2018 Petite. And then I found Syrah from some of my colleagues in the co-op where we make our wine, and bottled this summer 2 more vintages of Cuvée Cerise because the demand was there. So drinking more, direct to consumer sales, that is what is trending up in the wine industry. But I will tell you, the supply chain has been a challenge for us, in particular, getting wine bottles. I mean, we traditionally bottle our rosé in a clear glass. We are not going to be able to do that because we can't get clear bottles and even just bottling the Pinot Noir, trying to get the proper bottle. I mean, it has been a challenge, and we've had to delay bottling in order to get bottled. It is a big challenge. Corks, we order in mass, and I have my little label on them. So we had those, but it's been a really challenging time.
So Theodora, I've got a bunch of questions here for you from one of our audience members, Eddie. They're unrelated questions, so let me take them one at a time. The first one's asking about the development of Black women in South Africa to become owners in the largely or exclusively white male South African wine industry. Do you know anything about that industry? That
I know that there is a winery called Asilina, A-S-I-L-I-N-A, I think. Asilina is a winery in South Africa. The owner is the first Black woman vineyard winery owner. And I had the pleasure of sharing a cruise with her. There was a cruise back in 2018 and 2019 where Black women winemakers came to Miami, and people paid to come and have dinner and taste our wine. And I know that she is working on expanding the number of Black women in South Africa. The second question was, what type of law? I call sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it's management side, labor and employment law, because we get into sexual harassment, we do drug stings in warehouses. You get to ask kind of interesting questions during the depositions. As far as John Legend line, he is with JVB, and I think his wines are good. The winemaker in Napa is very good. They have a lot of brands. I know the New Zealand wines are mostly Sauvignon Blanc. I have had, not my favorite, and that I'll leave it at that.
Sure, great. Thanks for getting to all of those questions. Carmel, there's a question here about something I don't even think would be discussed years ago, corks versus twist tops. Is for a 50-year winery, how does that play, and how does that play at Monterey or at fine restaurants in Israel as well? Has that changed at all, or what's your take on it?
Well, I think there is a place for screw caps versus corks, really depending on the wine and the thought, where is it going to be drinking, how long is it going to be aged. For the majority of our wines, I am making these wines to be cellar aged. Of course, it can be drinking earlier on. Our Napa Cab is an early drinker, but can be cellared as well. So when you're thinking of making wine and producing wines to age in cellars, the packaging has to talk the same language, and corks are better. So far, maybe one day screw caps will be able to be on wines that are for aging, but I don't think there's enough research supporting that yet. And so we will probably stick with corks for most of our wines moving forward. But for wines that are supposed to be drinking much faster, like a rosé or a Sauv Blanc, I completely agree with the notion of having an easier cap, especially for wines that, people at home, they open the wine and maybe they don't drink it all and they put it back in the fridge. Using a screw cap is easier than a cork. It's easier to put it back in. For restaurants as well, if they're serving by the glass and they want to open bottles faster, a screw cap does make sense. But I really think it's a decision of the winery and the style and their vision of when would be best to drink the wine.
Theodora, is a screw cap just for Wonder Punch, or can you put it on some of your wine too?
Well, most of my wine, my Petit Syrah, my Cuvée Cerise, they definitely are going to be corked. They're aged. In fact, the reason they get cellar selection is because they drink best 10 years from bottling, not immediately. And so I will continue to buy corks from Portugal. Okay, and I'm very particular about my cork. And with my Symphony, with my Cuvée Blanc, those are my white wines, I could consider, but because I am trying to be in a price range of wines that is affordable for the masses, I want to make sure that I keep quality. And I'm not ready to have screw top wine. Okay, my dad used to drink screw top wine and it was horrible. So those kind of connotations, I don't want to have anything to do with it. But I think Carmel is right that if you are having lighter wines that don't age, it doesn't matter.
Well, I need to mention the fact that we got a great shout out for Spellman, and you shared some of the great stories of support. Both of you are studied at UC Davis and have that common root. So I want to go back to my question. In a male-dominated industry, when you were starting out, who helped you, or who were you learning from? And I hear, Theodora, some of your law partners and their families that were in the industry were an opening to that. But along the way, nobody cares about that stuff. You got to make it in this cold, tough world. Along the way, who were some of your role models? Who are some of the people that helped you, and are you in a position now to also pay that forward a little bit with other women who are interested in the industry?
Well, I'll take that. I had a lot of mentors along the way. Obviously, my law firm mentors are the ones who introduced me to vineyards. I'd never been on a vineyard before. I'm a little girl from Texas. We didn't have vineyards, although Texas is coming along and making some pretty decent wines now. But Mike Officer at Carlisle, he was the guy that I sold my grapes to the first 3 years. And so I was with him in the vineyard, making sure that the grapes were grown a specific way. We cut back half the fruit because we want to make quality, not quantity. Thinning, I mean, doing all of the things you do in the vineyard is something that I learned from Mike Officer. He's a cult winemaker. I mean, people sign up on his mailing list to sign up for his wine club, and then you can only buy a case. So he has been one of the biggest mentors that I have had to learn the business. Ed Kurtzman, who of Roar fame, he was their winemaker for many years, has taught me all about wine making, barrel selection. So men have taught me most of what I know in the wine business, and I have been very much involved in doing speaking engagements about other women winemakers, talking about that. I recently developed a scholarship at the University of California, Davis, for minority and women who are interested in viniculture. And so we got our first recipient that I'm going to meet probably in January, who is a woman of color who is interested in viniculture. So those are the kind of things that I have done to reach back and lift up and to make more women and women of color in particular in this business. And someone mentioned Black Girl Magic, the McBride sisters. They get their Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. They bottle wines from 2 countries, the United States. And so they're the largest African-American winery in the country. I don't compete on that level because I want to stay a small handcrafted winery.
Well, thanks for sharing the story about the scholarship at Davis, because that is a very concrete way to pay it forward, and an exciting thing that you've done in a fascinating career. Carmel, I loved seeing those pictures of you with your daughters and hearing them as part of the narrative. Is this going to be an industry that when they're ready to make their decisions about studies and careers, that you think 20 years from now is going to be something where there are a lot more women in various aspects of the industry?
I really hope so, and I am working on it, and I know that other women in the wine industry are working on it. I think it's worth mentioning that when I went to Davis, I think about 50% of the students are female, and I think it's kind of the average. But then when you go out to the industry, I don't know exactly the percentage, but it's way less than 50%. I think it's harder for women. It's still a male-dominated industry. Many times I find myself the only woman in vineyard meetings and cellar meetings and winemaking tastings. But I had an amazing mentor, Rebecca Weinberg. Now she's the winemaker at Quintessa. She was the winemaker at Bukela when I was there. And she really encouraged me and was a role model to what I can do. So I did have another male mentor, Todd Mostera from Dominus, but definitely I think it helps to see other women in these positions for younger women that are trying to get in the industry. I do participate in Women for Wine Sense. It's a women's group. We try to encourage and mentor each other and really make paths for younger women to get in the industry and stay in the industry. Because sometimes for women, they drop out more easily than men. It is tough to manage with family life. It's possible, I did it, but you do need a support system. And I am trying to do my share as well. I just promoted one of my interns to stay as a full-time worker here at Clos du Val. So I really think it's important for other women to mentor and to encourage and to hire other women and to make the whole wine community more inclusive and more diverse. It's better for the wines, it's better for our industry, and it's better for everyone.
Theodora, when I think about the arc of your career, I can't imagine there were too many African-American women in your law school class. And now you entered an industry where there are probably none or very few at the time. When you look out maybe on a 10-year horizon, 10 to 20 years, and I'm so thrilled in the context of the scholarship you mentioned. What do you think the industry might look like for someone, you know, maybe who hasn't been involved in for lots of different reasons?
Well, I will tell you, when I planted my vineyard, I became part of the Association of African American Vintners. I was the only woman. And there were very few Black men who owned their own vineyards and so on. And that was back in 2003. Today, I am happy to say that there are now over 200 members of the Association of African American Vintners. Many are not wine owners, but there are popping up regularly are brands, and I call them brands because they do not grow the grapes. They do not actually make the wine. They have a winemaker through a custom crush or some other facility make the wine, and they put their label on it. And there has been an expansion of Black women who have wine brands. And I think that's a good thing, because the more people in the as educators, as sommeliers, as brand owners, is going to create other opportunity. As Carmel says, when you see someone like yourself doing this, it gives you the belief that you can do it too. And, you know, I think having more and more people of color and women in particular is good. And I see that expanding as time goes on. As you know, I hate to say it, but Black Lives Matter in 2020 caused a lot of people in the industry to take notice that it didn't have diversity. And so Constellation Brands, for instance, has made a commitment to support Black owned brands. I know they took an interest in a rosé company owned by a gentleman out of Atlanta, Georgia, who went to Clark. So, you know, it is going to be different 10 years from now. And I think there will be more diverse people making wine, drinking wine, and in the wine industry, because there is a concentrating effort right now to diversify.
Well, Theodora, Carmel, at the risk of stating the obvious, for our webinar today, you are both queens of the vineyards, and you have officially crushed it for us. The only way we can repay you is to make sure that everyone is going to get the specifics on your wineries. This is a great week, whether it's for Christmas or New Year's, to order a case of wine and send it to an office party, to send it to a home party. Everybody should be socially distant and safe at those parties, but they should order wine and celebrate. And here are two great opportunities to do that.
And I want to say this, one of the things that we've done through the pandemic, we have done virtual tastings, meaning with corporate team building. I mean, everybody, sororities, fundraisers, I mean, people have become very creative. And so they either, I set up a code for their members to buy the wine, and then I get on Zoom and talk about the wine. Corporations will buy, 53 packs and put give me the addresses and we ship it out, and then we walk through the wine. So until this pandemic is over, we're going to continue to do that. So reach out via email. We always love it.
Well, thank you so much. You've given us so much inspiration and inspiration for what this industry might look like a few years down the road as a result of both of your pioneering activities and efforts. It's really exciting to put a face to a brand and to hear the story that for both of you is so authentic, and it's filled with your family. It's filled with your names having meaning, and really just so great to have met both of you and to share this with this larger audience. So I think everybody here knows, we've been doing this now since the beginning of COVID, twice a week, and we ain't stopping till the end of the year. So stay with us this coming Wednesday. We've got part 2 in our series on the Israeli fashion industry. You don't have to be able to fit into a Gotex bathing suit in order to join us. We're talking about national identity and how these different fashion brands have contributed to really what the identity of Israel is today. We hope you'll join us for that. A week from today, next Sunday, our popular virtual tour series continues with our master guide, Reuven Solomon. Will be going to Gamla, the Masada of the north, not far from the Galilee area, which I know Theodora visited previously, and near where Carmel was not born, where she was raised. And indeed, we want you all there for that. And we will end the year on our next Wednesday webinar, which will be a concert from the Bookman Meta Music School at Tel Aviv University in collaboration with the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. That's a lot of culture. That's a lot of love. That's a lot of wine. If you order it from one of these galleries to enjoy, you can order a case and watch it during our webinar. Carmel, Theodora, thanks so much for being with us. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Greetings to all of our friends. Have a safe week and a safe end of the year. And please join us for the remainder of the programs.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.